Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Get her a sheet. A sheet. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parvajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parvajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. I think I'm on 19. Is it 19? Who knows?
Prabhu, it is 18.
18, okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 13th day of April 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, text 18 on page 156. You ready there, Sureshwar? Okay. Naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschid artha vyapashayaha naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha. Bhajamandal. Please initiate. Naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha. Want to try? Naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana bhuteshu sarvabhuteshu nachasya sarvabhuteshu vyapāṣayaha vyapāṣayaha kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha. Go ahead. Either of you, or both of you. Naiva tasya kutenato nakuteneha kashtana nachasya sarvabhuteshu kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha. Anyone on Zoom?
Naiva tasya kutenato
Naiva tasya kutenato
nakuteneha kashtana
nakuteneha kashtana
nachasya sarvabhuteshu
nachasya sarvabhuteshu
kaschidārtha vyapāṣayaha.
kaschidārtha vipāṣayaha. Not never, eva, certainly, tasya, his, kritena, by discharge of duty, artaha, purpose, na, nor akritena, without discharge of duty, iha, in this world, kashtana, whatever. Na, never, cha, and asya, of him, sarvabhuteshu, among all living beings, kaschid, any, artha, purpose, vyapāṣayaha, taking shelter of. Translation. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Purport. A self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So one or two notes before I begin exploring this verse. The first is Prabhupada's use of the word man indicates human being. I think we understand that, right? It's not some sexist thing. He learned English in the early 20th century from the Scottish Church College, and so it's a human being. So a self-realized human being has no purpose to a self-realized person like that. So just read it down. The other thing is in the Sanskrit. Now, at the back of this book, of each of your books, there's a Sanskrit pronunciation guide. And the thing about this is it's all phonetic. Each letter has a certain sound assigned to it. And these little marks called diacritics over them, they tell you how to pronounce. Like there's the short A, ah, and the long A, ah. The short A, I, and the long I, e. And so it's all in the back of the book. And gradually, and if you're interested, I made a recording of the whole Bhagavad Gita with all of these verses, and it's free. Just write to me at Dravida108@gmail. I'll send you the recording, and you can learn how to pronounce. Okay, so now this verse, as every verse actually, there's a context. So if you recall, we go way back to text 14, where Krishna is describing the need for sacrifice in this world if you just want to eat. The basic principle of growing grains and how that happens. We're dependent on higher forces. We may think there's nobody out there and it's all happening automatically, but that's not true. There's a god of the sun, there's a sun god, there's a water god, Varuna, there's a wind god, Vayu, all of these representatives of the supreme god. These are demigods. They're like a big government. Just like we have a government of the city, government of the state, of the whole country. And there's a cabinet and there's representatives and they have their little jobs, right? And if everything works smoothly, then the state and everything runs nicely. So similarly, there's, say, the god of the heavens, Indra. Now Indra, of course, we're sitting here in New Govardhan. So those who know, this is commemorating a pastime in which Krishna really, one of his purposes in this pastime was that he told his father and other seniors, members of the community, and it was a farming community, so they depended on enough rain, not too much rain at the right times, for successful agriculture. So they were worshiping Indra. Indra's in charge of the weather, the heavens. And they were doing it regularly. They had been doing it for years. But Krishna said, you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about Indra. And he gave all this argument. I won't get into the detail. Just worship Govardhan Hill, because Govardhan Hill was providing wonderful fresh grasses for the cows and doing so much. And so they did. And Indra became very angry. And he said, oh, they're neglecting my worship? I'll show them. And he called these ferocious clouds to pour down huge amounts of rain and hail and hurricane winds, and he's practically ready to destroy the whole community. He became extremely enraged. So Krishna, in order to protect his friends and the cows and show his love for them and have a wonderful pastime on, and also to curb Indra's pride, which was not good for him, he lifted the hill up. You can see in each corner of this temple, there's a commemoration. You can see a nice little statue there. Krishna is lifting up the hill with one little finger of his left hand. And he held it up for 7 days and protected the whole community. And so he accomplished two things. One, he showed that if you worship God, if you direct your worship and your honor and your sacrifice and your attention to the supreme God, you don't have to worship any of the demigods, because they're all working at under his order. So he'll make sure that Indra is sending the right amount of rain at the right time, not too much, not too little, and the sun is shining, and all these things are happening. And so that's actually what happened in this pastime. And the cowherd community got to be with him 7 days straight. You know, it was like a unique experience, and there was so many things happened under that hill. So that we go back to text 14, 14, 15. No, 14, where Krishna says, Anadbhavanti Bhutane. I won't go through the Sanskrit. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna or sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. So in the ordinary course of things, these sacrifices are important, just like it's important to pay your taxes or to pay the power bill, otherwise it's going to shut off. So sacrifice. Now where do the sacrifices come from? Next verse. Yajna is born of prescribed duties in the society. Everyone has a role to play. So where do the prescribed duties come from? Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas. And the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So this, in other words, it brings it back now to the all-pervading transcendence. That's God, that's Krishna. He's the one who spoke the Vedas. That's where you get your duties from. If you follow your duties nicely and perform the sacrifices, you'll have enough rain and you'll prosper. So this is the ordinary course of things. But then he says, if someone does not follow this cycle, in other words, you sacrifice to the gods, and they in turn send enough rain in order for you to prosper, then you take part of that prosperity and you make more sacrifices, and this way everyone is happy. You pay your taxes nicely, the government keeps things going, unless it's corrupted. We won't go there. So there's a chakra. There's a cycle here. You see the cycle of life. If one does not follow it, and simply forgets about the gods, there's no God, there's no gods, we're in charge, we can, as human beings, we can dominate nature and control nature, you know, which is a modern idea. This is called agayo indriya ramo. This is a sinful life simply dedicated to gratifying the senses. Human life has a higher purpose, not to gratify the senses. That's the animals are doing that. You become degraded that way. You can even lose the human form of life, which is very precious. So he says, Agayo indriyaramo mogang partasa jivati. One who lives only for sense gratification leads a sinful life and is a fruitless life. In other words, it's moga means, what does moga say? Uselessly. So we don't want to do that. But then he says something very interesting. Yes, tvatmadadeva, but on the other hand, but one who takes pleasure in the self. Now there's capital S self, that means it's Krishna. In you as a spirit soul reviving your relationship to Krishna by following the Vedic instructions, but it's not a life of sense gratification, and you're not worshiping the gods. You're worshiping the God. You're worshiping God himself. Takes pleasure in that, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. You don't have to worship anyone else. You don't have to worry about anything else. Simply perform your duties in Krishna consciousness. And yes, you have to do something to keep body and soul together. There are material things to do, minimally. But Krishna is ultimately in charge, and he will provide for you. So if someone is on that path, then these previous verses don't apply. In other words, you don't have to worry about this chakra. You're in a much more important relationship with God himself. And then today's verse went on in that theme, and that a self-realized man or self-realized person has no purpose to fulfill, meaning he doesn't have any personal purpose. He's taking his cue from the higher authority all the time. No purpose to fulfill in discharge of his prescribed duties, nor is he any reason not to perform such work, nor is he any need to depend on any other living being. So this is someone who's depending ultimately on God, on Krishna. And Krishna's changed gears a little bit here. And he's going to go in that vein now. So any questions on these points that I've made so far? Okay, you have your mic there? We should have one for the ladies too. Where's the other mic?
There.
You have it? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So can you elaborate on this self and self-realization and how it is related to directly Krishna?
Yes. So as I pointed out last night, there was a convention that I didn't start it, but way back when they started printing the books, and Prabhupada actually when he was writing the books, there are some words that can refer to human beings or to God, like him or his or he, these pronouns. How do we know if it's referring to a human being or not? If it's cap he or cap him or cap his, Prabhupada set it up, then it's referring to Krishna or one of his expansions, or to Radharani, Srimati Radharani. Similarly, the word self. Commonly we have herself, himself, his, like that. That's, of course, to the person. And it usually refers to the body. But the word self alone, or atma, refers to the soul. But then we learn, and soon enough, in Bhagavad Gita, especially in chapter 13, that there's two souls in each body. There's two selves. There's the individual soul and the super soul. And that super soul is expanded in the heart of every living being. And it's ultimately expanded from Krishna. So that's God himself within our heart. So we're never very far from him. And he's trying to instruct us. But we can't hear him, so we have to read the book. He's coming through the book and through the great souls. So this cap self indicates that one who takes pleasure in the self, as Prabhupada says at the very first sentence of the purport. This is why I did, because what he means by this, there's different ways of reading this, and we have different commentators. A person who is fully Krishna conscious and is fully satisfied by his acts in Krishna consciousness is no longer has any duty to perform, any material duty. So, self-realization for a devotee, now, depends on what your conception of the Supreme is. Oftentimes, self-realization means, I'm realizing myself as a spiritual being, like that. That's a form of self-realization, and it's not outside the compass of Krishna consciousness. But real self-realization ultimately culminates in God realization. Otherwise, it can be impersonal. You can think, I'm pure spirit. I don't have any birth, I don't have any death, I'm just pure consciousness, and you can get into the impersonal understanding. So when we have a book, famous book, millions and millions have been distributed in probably 50 languages at least or more, The Science of Self-Realization. But it soon becomes clear when you read that book that self-realization means God realization. That if you understand Krishna, you'll also understand yourself. What's the first lesson Krishna's teaching us? He teaches in the second chapter that you're not the body, this physical body, but that you're the spirit, the consciousness within the body. That conscious self is yourself, and to understand that and live that consciousness is a form of self-realization. But ultimately, for devotees, for Vaishnavas, self-realization must include realization of Krishna. And if you realize Krishna and your relationship with Krishna, you go back to God, that's the ultimate in self-realization. You see what I'm saying? So that's the idea. Okay, so there's no purpose. No purpose to fulfill means he has no purpose outside the purpose of fulfilling the desires of Krishna. That's the idea. Okay, so should we go on? Let's explore. He continues with, yes, please. Yeah, just print the mic out. You have to press the button until the light goes on.
Okay. The last line that says that he doesn't have any need to depend on any other living being. Can you just go into that just a little bit more? Because I feel that we all
okay,
have,
in the translation, yeah.
Yeah. I feel that we all have dependence on other people, our gurus, our significant others. So
okay.
If you can kind of go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that this is someone who is depending on Krishna. And what I get from that is that you don't look to, that you're depending on Krishna for how to interact with other living beings so that you'll get your necessities. But you realize that, it's coming ultimately from Krishna. I mean, naturally, just like I was pointing, we depend on the gods for, like Indra for the water and Surya for the light and so many things. So we're dependent. But we understand, and it says right in the Bhagavad Gita, that they are only giving their blessings and what they can, what they can give us for our necessities by the grace of God. Just like we have in the 9th chapter, Maya Jakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetanani Nakonte Jagaviparivartate. That under my supervision, Prakriti is creating this world and so many things are going on. So ultimately we understand we're depending on nature, but nature is depending on God, so we're depending on God. And that we see that, okay, of course we're going to interact with other human beings, and we need to, but the ultimate controller and inspirer is Krishna from within. So in that way you understand it that way. You see, the whole idea is to start with God, and then everything else develops from that, and you see your whole life revolving around that. That's the Krishna consciousness. I think he's talking about like that. So let's see, that now we have a therefore verse, so this should be kind of summing up text 19. Tasmad asakta satatam karyam karma samachara asakto yacharan karma padamapnoti purushaha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Purport. The Supreme is the personality of Godhead for the devotees and liberation for the impersonalists. A person, therefore, acting for Krishna or in Krishna consciousness, under proper guidance and without attachment to the result of the work, is certainly making progress toward the supreme goal of life. Arjuna is told that he should fight in the battle of Kurukshetra for the interest of Krishna, because Krishna wanted him to fight. To be a good man or a non-violent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Vedic rituals, like prescribed sacrifices, are performed for purification of impious activities that were performed in the field of sense gratification. But action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. He engages in all kinds of activities, but is completely non-attached. So, let's think a minute about one of the main themes in this whole chapter, and that is, which is karma yoga. So we're going to do something. It says near the beginning of the chapter, you can't do nothing, even for a moment. Even if you're sitting like a stone statue meditating, your mind is active. You're working with your mind. You're probably fighting your mind, bring it back to Vishnu, In other words, you're still acting. And so the real, now, we come into this world, we have a whole history of activities that we performed. And these activities in the human form, we've had activities in lower form, but yet they don't produce karma. Only in human form, with a higher intelligence, are we responsible for our activities. So, as human beings, we have a whole history, and we're enjoying and suffering the results of those activities. This is the law of karma. People, we don't realize it. Oh, why is this child born with some congenital disease? Why is this child born in a wonderful family, intelligence, and, from day one? And so many things happen in our lives. So there's a history, and it's playing out. And if we don't have any yoga, we don't have any process at all, we're simply living in the world, then we're sure and certain, well, everyone's going to die, leave the body, but we're sure to come back again and to go through this cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death. And then we have what we call the threefold miseries. You have those which are not pleasant, certainly. And then you have threefold miseries. Adhyatmic, adhibhautic, adhidaivik. Adhyatmic means miseries that arise out of your own body and mind. You're just doing what you've always done. Weather is okay, nobody's trying to hurt you, but your mind is disturbed somehow. Or some pain comes over here. Your own body and mind, are giving you trouble with apparently no outside cause. Now these overlap because the next one is adhibhautic. Adhibhautic is other living beings, oftentimes other human beings, but it could be bugs, it could be anyone. Other living beings that are causing you some suffering. Now, oftentimes this suffering is just fear. There's a danger. There's an elephant loose somewhere. Maybe not right here, but someplace. And so, is he coming to this part of town? Maybe I hear something. So already that's a kind of suffering, right? Yeah. So the fear and the anxiety is also a kind of suffering. So that elephant who's loose, who may be in a whole different part of town, is causing you suffering. That's adibautic. But your own body and mind is what's also reacting, you see? So there's an overlap. And then you have adidaivik. That's become very clear. Huge storms in the Atlantic. I like to recall when I was in Miami. I spent 6 years in Miami back in the 80s working on books. And Miami, you have to watch the weather, especially from July to September, October, because there could be some hurricane coming. So we'd watch, get up in the morning, first thing to do is get that weather channel. And while I was there was hurricanes that came north of us, south of us. I don't remember any hurricane hitting full on. When I came here, that autumn, I came in August, and that September, there was a huge hurricane coming right to the temple. I called up my friend there because I just left, and I said, Dharma Das, he's still there. What are you doing about the hurricane? Did the devotees leave? He said, no, we're just having a big kirtan. Dharma, it's coming right at you. So we're relying on Krishna. So sure enough, that hurricane swerved at the last minute and went south and did a little bit of damage to the temple so they could claim something for the federal government. They were able to put in new floors and everything. I swear. So there was a happy ending there. But the point is that, when I came out here, what about I heard about the earthquake danger. I immediately found out where is that fault. What is it? The San Andreas fault. I said, it deviates to the east before it hits San Diego. Okay, but there's this other fault, So these things happen. In 1994, I wasn't there. This was in L.A. They had a huge earthquake that hit the temple directly. It was miraculous. You know how it happened? That pillar there, that onyx little pillar that we have for the Charanamrita, that's a remnant of what they had in New Dwarka. I recognize that onyx. It may have come before. It may have been left over. But they had a whole onyx all over the temple. I was there when they put it in '75. It cost $100,000. And they were, it was beautiful, and everything. So 1994, I forget the date. Devotees were just ready to, with the curtains open, at Mangalarti. Mangalarti, everyone was there. In conch shell blue, everyone bowed down to Gaura Nitai. They got up, came down to Rukmini Dwarkadesh. Then the earth started shaking. All the onyx came down. If they had been on the wall, there might have been some serious injuries, but the devotees were all in the middle of the temple. No one was injured. Krishna's arrangement. But it was tremendously shocking, And the devotees started running, the ladies started screaming, and they think they took the deities out of the temple. It was a whole thing, So these happen. The adibautic, when there's a big war going on, it's a lot of adibautic and all this stuff. So this is what it means to be incarnated as a human being again and again, to face those threefold miseries. And if everything is nice and peaceful, you're just nice and you're growing old, nice peacefully, you still get old age and disease and death. That's not going to stop. So we want to try to have as a central motive of our spiritual life, it's a good foundation, although it's not the ultimate motive for devotees, to break free of this round of birth and death. And the Prabhupada's immortal phrase, go back home, back to Godhead. There's so much in that phrase. It means that that's our home. We're in exile here. We're like refugees who somehow we're here, but it's not our real home. It's temporary. Don't you feel that sometimes? Yeah. So our home is in the spiritual world, the Goloka Vrindavan. And a wonderful thing about the literature that Srila Prabhupada translated and commentated on with great effort is that he gives descriptions of that. I remember, I can't directly remember this, but in the early days, Prabhupada came with 3 books. The first canto, of the 12th canto Bhagavatam. His plan was to write publish the whole thing in 60 volumes. So he had 3 volumes with him, and he felt he could come to America. And wonderful, wonderful book, the first canto. So much important instruction, very inspiring, And the devotees had that, and they had this little E.T. journey to other planets, and the Ishopanishad came out, and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. But none of those books explicitly describe Lord Krishna's Leela, his pastimes, which comes in the 10th canto here and just the first canto. So Prabhupada stopped working on the Bhagavatam, the verse-by-verse Bhagavatam, in about 1970 or late 69, and started dictating a running translation of the 10th canto, which we have as the Krishna book. 90 chapters of Krishna's pastimes that he engaged in Vrindavan and other places, Mathura and Dwarka in India, 5,000 years ago. This is the essence of the whole Bhagavatam, and this is what can really attract us to him personally, so that we awaken our original and dormant personal relationship with Krishna, with God. So that came out. So we can read that book. Anyone, we distribute it by thousands. So we can become acquainted with our real home, the Loka Vrindavan, what's going on there, this idyllic world, and become attracted to do the necessary steps, beginning with chanting Hare Krishna regularly, that will take us there, that will purify our hearts, and we reawaken who we really are. So that includes within it, that then our motive is no longer just to break free of all this suffering and get to the place of no suffering, but our motive is positive. Oh, I want to serve Krishna this way. I want to taste the nectar of Krishna consciousness, and along with that, as a byproduct, is liberation. You see how your motive changes over the course of time. So here we are in chapter 3 of Karma Yoga, and it's a practical instruction of how to work, how to act in such a way. Two things. So you're not incurring any more karma. Karma means something that you're going to have to get a result from, either a good or bad result. But even if it's a good result, you have to come back again in a physical body in order to get that result. So even good karma is not good enough. We want no karma. We want to act and be able to work in such a way. It's called Naish Karmya. That we're not getting good karma or bad karma. And the way to do that is that we're simply working on the instruction of Krishna. The whole theme of the Bhagavad Gita is that. Arjuna, who's after all an intimate devotee of Krishna, life after life, he was taking the role of someone who is attached. So attached to, it's natural, to his wonderful grandfather on the other side, and his teacher, and all his friends and relatives. He had blood relationships. And suddenly, I'm going to fight this battle and kill them? I'd rather not, enjoy the kingdom. I don't want the kingdom. Be soaked with their blood. This is one of his verses. But he knew, Krishna's right on the chariot, that Krishna wanted him to fight. So he's in a dilemma. Because he knew that Krishna is the authority, is God, But he didn't want to harm his beloved friends, So he was paralyzed. Here's this tremendous warrior. He sits down on the chariot, drops his bow. He's crying, basically, He's paralyzed. So what's his solution? We can learn from this. He surrendered to Krishna. Rather than as a friend, as a guru, as a spiritual master, who's someone who can give him absolute knowledge that we know is true and is best for us. We know this person is not trying to exploit us. He simply wants us to awaken to the truth, act on the basis of that truth, and be benefited eternally. And that's what Krishna gives. And his first lesson is you're not the body, you're the spirit soul, and now I'm going to teach you how to work as a spirit soul. That was last chapter. Now in the third chapter, Krishna began his instruction in the second chapter. So now the practical, how can we work in this world without incurring any karma and simultaneously burning off previous karma so we don't have to come back again. And that's ultimately the process of Krishna consciousness. So many things to do. Just like Bhakta Saul, he works so hard that it's sometimes hard for him to, he doesn't get enough sleep. But he's working. Right, Bhakta Saul? Yeah, he's working in the kitchen, he's working here, he's going out distributing books. So we all do that. Anyone who's living in the temple, certainly. But none of it, you're not doing it, So what's my salary here? I'm sweeping this temple. Am I making minimum wage? No, it's not like that. I like to give an example because I've been around so long, almost 50 years in this movement. So this was like the first year, 1973, and we had so many devotees in this, the Brooklyn Temple, the Henry Street Temple is legendary. Like 100 devotees packed into this duplex. And so, but we had a nice temple room, maybe 2/3 the size of this. nice, but enough, we were packed in tight. So one of my jobs was every morning, we had so many devotees, we had a Maha cleanup every morning, for 20 minutes before breakfast. Everyone had his little area to do. So my area was the temple room. To mop it means get on your hands and knees with a bucket, and go like this. So, so what was playing was, every morning we listened to Govindam prayers. Those are Govindam Adi Purusham. So on that same record, it was originally a record, is this other song that Yamuna sings. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. She got a whole band. I mean, she had George Harrison of the Beatles, and making the music and everything. So it was very attractive. I was playing, and I'm doing my work here. The deities are open. I'm seeing Radha Govinda, and I'm seeing, this is the, this is the perfection of my life, I can look at the deities, I can hear this song, and I can do service to the Lord. Now, I wasn't thinking, am I getting paid? That didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even think what was for breakfast, which was unusual for me at that point because I was already, I was always, I was eating a lot. But the idea is that, Prabhupada worked so hard to give us a chance to have this opportunity to taste the nectar of simply doing work, chanting for Krishna's pleasure, and at the same time you're feeling spiritual pleasure, which is different than material pleasure because it doesn't have to end. The only reason it ends is because our mind wanders, But if you keep your mind on Krishna and you keep working for Him and you remember His beauty and how He reciprocated with His, then you can be happy, with very, very little, as a great church. So that's what he's saying here. Asakta satatam, who's always unattached. Remember that our material attachments are like ropes that bring us back again and again to a material body to try to work somewhere. So asakta, this is another word for this, vairagya. Vairagya means no raga, no material attachment. But as much raga as possible for Krishna. You have to turn it, toward. So instead of like near rock music songs, then we like to hear bhajans, beautiful bhajans. The internet is filled with them. There's beautiful kirtans. So it's like a great, the ISKCON Desire Tree. All these lectures are on there. You can hear, from years ago, or hundreds of them, of so many wonderful sannyasis and speakers, from all over the world. It's like that's there. If you click, some other button, then you go to some other horrible site. I won't even mention. So it's all a question of your desire, what you are aiming to do, and how you act in order to realize that. We're reading Bhagavad Gita here. There's a million other books we could be reading, but this Bhagavad Gita is instructing us in our eternal life and giving us a chance to reawaken our original Krishna consciousness. So, do our duties in Krishna consciousness. Asakto, again he emphasized, acharan karma, paramapnoti purusha. One can attain the supreme destination by working, accepting duties in Krishna consciousness and acting that way as a matter of course, and gradually purifying our consciousness and becoming more and more ecstatic. Okay. Any questions or comments?
One.
All right. Please.
So regarding this, lower species doesn't have karma. They don't create karma, right?
Yeah.
So as a human being, we do some bad karmas and we go down like into lower species.
We
right?
can easily do that.
Yeah, so which means that, and then we come back again some point in time as human.
Yes, we eventually come up.
Yeah. So how it works, like, it's like just that if I'm a human, I do a lot of bad things, go into lower species. And while I'm in lower species, basically I'm eradicating all my karmas, bad karmas to come back to human form, I get a chance.
Yeah, it's playing out. In other words, there's a suffering, there's an interim period there, which is just, we're coming up in the morning class. I don't know if you're hearing that. The fifth canto. The end of the fifth canto, the description of hellish punishments. And it's very interesting. One thing that was fascinating when I started working on these books, the practically infinite malleability of time, meaning that when you leave this body and you're not, and your mind is separate from it, then a whole lot of things can happen in a short time. And it can seem like a long time, but it's very short. Why does it seem like a long time? Because you're suffering, but it's described in the books of, thousands of years, you're being tortured. But what's happening is your consciousness is being covered more and more, so that you then, when it's suitable for, some dog's body or something, then you can take birth as a dog. And then there's no more suffering per se. I mean, there's suffering in a dog's body also, but not like in hell. And then you come up to maybe a higher breed of dog. There's a whole, until finally you get out of the dog's body. I don't know the whole sequence. But eventually you come back to the human form. But that doesn't really help you unless there's someone enlightened who you can meet, or you can get a book. In other words, you need to, there needs to be an intervention from Krishna. He's always reaching out. He's reaching out through the holy names, through the deities, through the temples, through the prasadam, through the devotees, through the books. But in order to manifest that, you need someone like Srila Prabhupada, who would actually perform the incredible sacrifice of coming to America at age 69 with no money, and preaching this alien philosophy, didn't really fit. But because he was sincere, Krishna gave him so much blessing and so much potency. When he chanted, he was able to attract the crew, and gradually it grew, and it's all over the world now. So yeah, it's a science, and we've been in this trap for a long, long time. But now we're getting out of it. Even just coming to this one class, even if you don't come back. But we heard this, I think he quoted, Nehabikramanasosti pratyabhayo navidyate swapam abhasyadamaste trayate mahatobayat. That in this endeavor of Krishna consciousness, there's no loss and diminution. What does that mean? It means that even a little bit, this is a swalpam, suopam, even a little bit of advancement can protect you from the most fearful type of danger. Nobody in this room is going to get an animal body. That's pretty good. You've done some Krishna consciousness, you're doing Krishna consciousness. So if you don't complete the course in one lifetime, you'll come back and start where you left off. Krishna promises that in the 6th chapter. That's very encouraging. But we should try to go back to Godhead in this one lifetime. Why prolong the agony? There's even a scene in the Kapila Dev at the end of the 3rd canto, describes life in the womb. What you wake up after 6.5 months, they describe it. That, how the child is kicking, I don't know, but anyone who's had a child knows, that they start kicking at one point, So they wake up, and the mind is working. Of course, your senses aren't really doing much, but the mind is working. And he describes, how did I get into this? Krishna, I promise, next birth I will go to Mangalartik every day. I'll chant my rounds. But what he describes there is that you may come out and you may not be in a devotee family, and he says, and then it all becomes covered over again. But at least you're in a human family. And then when you grow up, there's Dimitri or somebody, you meet him on the street, or Saul, or Vijay, and get a book. In other words, devotees are out there, in the modern world. So the idea is that knowing all this, we should get serious and practice. Basically chant seriously and follow the regular principles and try to advance as far as possible as we can in this lifetime. And we've had experiences recently. We had three devotees pass away, Shamali, and of course Rajendrandana and Madhusudan. And they all had auspicious passings. Rajendrandana, he's lying there. I mean, I heard this amazing, and there's one other devotee there, and his business partner, his friend, And suddenly he asked him, why are there so many people in the room? It was just 2 of them. And so this devotee said, are they the nice people? Because they can also be, said, yes, they're nice people. And then at the last moment, he was chanting the name Krishna. And Shamali, our beloved Shamali, everyone knew Shamali, the devotee girl who grew up in the movement here. I knew her when she was a little girl. I remember when she took up the flute. I heard her playing the flute and everything. Very wonderful, wonderful lady. She married one of our devotees here who came, Bhishma Dev. When I went to Alatra, I would see them. They would invite me for lunch and everything, you know. So she came down with cancer. It was a big shock, you know. And but she had friends all over the movement, and her spiritual master was calling her from Vrindavan every day and spending time with her on the phone, encouraging her and guiding her. Indra Jumna Swami, you know. I called a couple of times and read some poems to her, you know. And Yamuna describes that at the last moment, there was no fear, there was no, you know, tears. She just like breathed out, and it was just like the Vaikuntha airplane came and took her back. You know, very peaceful. So this is, Krishna describes in the 8th chapter, we're going to hear, Antakale chamameva smaran mukva kalevanam yapriyati samadbalam yati nastrata shanksa. Those who remember me at the Antakale, the last moment of death, you know, they'll come to me for sure. And then he gives the general principle. Yam yang vapi swaram bhavam chajachante kalevanam tamtave vaitikonteya sadatad bhava bhavata. Whatever is the prominent thought in your mind at the time, that will determine your future. That will determine your future birth. So we are cultivating our thoughts and our desires now at this time. But knowing the science, we should choose to cultivate those thoughts that will allow us to remember Krishna at the time of death. It's all a final exam, each one of us. So that's the essence of Krishna consciousness. And we're almost at the end. So I'll give you one little poem. This is I came up with. This is you can remember. Try to remember this one. I changed it a little bit so you can listen for it. Each and everybody dies, or each and every body dies. Each and everybody dies. Nobody dies. Wake up and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Got it, Saul? Okay. I'll check.